Welcome to Neurosalience, the OHBM podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Organization for Human Brain Mapping Neurosalience podcast, season 6. So I'm Xuqian Michelle Li, so the production team lead for the seasons, and I'm excited to be here as part of the communication committee at OHBM. So today is such a great honor again, and also it is our tradition to have our first episodes of the seasons to here with our wonderful host, Peter Banditti, to talk about some of the highlights from last seasons and also to hear what's coming up in the new season. So hi, Peter. How are you doing? Great to have you here.
Well, thanks. It's great to be here for a sixth season, and I look forward to working with you in terms of everything that's involved with this production. It's not only me hosting, but it's you sort of heading up the whole production process, so which is a lot of work with your team as well. So, looking forward to things. It's been an interesting year so far for me. It's things have been a little bit turbulent, but not so turbulent that we can't have a podcast. So, looking forward to it.
Yeah. All right. So I guess maybe we can just get started, and first we can just look back at the last season, so season 5 of Neurosalience, and what were some of the highlights or moments that kind of stood out to you, Peter?
Yeah. So season 5 had 15 episodes and a lot of just amazing guests. Just to quickly read them off, Angie Laird, Farouk Goiban was introducing season 5. He was the lead production person last year. Alan Evans, Matthew Cobb, who was the author of The Idea of the Brain. The 5th podcast was my own, but it was a talk that I gave at OHBM on the role of podcasts. Veza Kevinyemi, Seiji Ogawa, Max Shine, Sapita Segdayani, Simon Eickhoff, Michael Millam. And then we had a panel talking about the future of scientific publishing. And then we had another panel talking about a preview for OHBM. And Rosanna Olson, and then finally a live panel, which we talked to students and postdocs and junior professors who were, or mid-career people talking about different stages of their academic career. That went over pretty well. So my highlights, I have a number of them. To me, the biggest highlight was interviewing Seiji Ogawa. So initially, he had retired, and I thought he was unreachable. But Ravi Menon, a good friend of mine, a colleague who had worked with him, he actually said, "Oh no, he's doing fine. He's actually, even though he's 90 years old, he's right now taking a class in Python programming and playing tennis several times a week." And I'm like, okay. So I contacted him and I was able to talk to him. He was actually on my thesis committee when I was getting my PhD, and it was a lot of fun just talking to him about the history and what was, to me, most satisfying. It was kind of cathartic to talk to him. And I was actually trying to, anticipate what the audience was maybe interested in and, thinking, okay, you had the insight to discover bold contrasts or to bring it out in some sense. And what was essential? He was, obviously Seiji he's very direct, but he's also very humble. And he didn't really indicate, that there was anything special involved, other than, at least what I gleaned from him, is just becoming completely obsessed with the field and not really paying too much attention to what other people are doing, and just having complete confidence in what you're doing. That usually allows you more latitude to sort of see things that aren't seen by others. And so that was actually useful. One other minor highlight, not really a highlight, but midway through my discussion with him, his microphone went out. It turned out it was one of those podcasting things where he couldn't recover it. He couldn't get the sound back. And so through sign language and texting, I basically said, hey, let's just regroup tomorrow or in a couple of days, whatever, and then we'll finish it off. And we did that. And so it worked out well. So other people, just really quickly, Matthew Cobb was really interesting. It was a little bit outside my comfort zone because he's not in the field. So most of the people I interview, I kind of know, and I have to start to push myself beyond that. But I didn't know Matthew. He's sort of a professional writer, professional science writer. He had a beautiful book called The Idea of the Brain. It was all about how the world, how the scientists think of the brain. What are the ideas of the brain over time? And beautiful book, really well written. The only issue I had with the book was he kind of dissed fMRI a little bit as being like, well, it's sort of this thing that shows these blobs, but it doesn't really tell you much. And I realized something about myself when I was interviewing him. It's like, on one hand, I could have, easily argued for the benefits of fMRI.
Yep.
But I realized, he's not an expert and I'd be preaching to the choir anyway. And so I kind of like mentioned it, and he sort of suggested that, well, maybe there's more to the story. And I sort of let it at that. I realized that an important point of this podcast is that I don't like to put people on the spot or to argue a point with them. I'd like to bring out what they have to offer. And even though that was a point of contention, I kind of let it go for the purpose of bringing out, everything else in the book that he had to say. So it was a really good interview. One more just to mention, it was fun interviewing Veze Kevinyemi. I mean, every single person was just, it's so much fun to interview everyone. But Veze was really fun, partially because, he's in Finland. And when I was interviewing him, he was in his office, kind of trapped in his office with a snowstorm going on. And he wasn't even sure if he was going to get home at the end of the day. He was talking about, using high-speed, something called MREG, high-speed imaging, to pull out further subtleties in the resting state fMRI signal. And what it illustrates to me is that, and this is an important general point, is that if you have better tools and if you have that can, image faster or even look at the signal in any sort of different way, it's worth looking at the raw signal, keep on looking at it and drawing out information from it, because there's still information to be had from the raw signal. And he showed that right there. So that was kind of inspiring in that regard. And of course, the live podcast was great because we had so many different students and junior faculty and all sharing really their unique view that resonated with, I think, most of this audience in terms of their shared experience as a junior faculty, dealing with the challenges that they have to deal with. So overall, I'd recommend listening to all of them. It was a lot of fun to do. And I'm looking forward to this season.
And yes, basically, as Peter mentioned, we only had like 15 episodes last seasons, but we kind of like try to cover a diverse range of topics and themes, and also like panel discussions and also live podcasts with students, and trying to have more different formats and also things to talk about, and also the life stories of different guests. And those are quite interesting to hear as well. And so I also want to mention my favorite episode of the last seasons, which is actually the last one. So the one that's talking about the publication landscape, and with Michael and with Nichols. And I still remember Nichols' interesting analogy of publishing scientific papers. So it's like you are trying to prepare your own meals, and then it turns out that you have to pay the restaurant full price for it. So it's quite interesting. And also to me as a like kind of early career researcher, it just reminds me about like there's kind of issues out there, but luckily we seems to have like many different solutions, and maybe in the future we can have like different way outs. And also it kind of reminds my own experience with doing with publications and things. So I basically have one of my papers accepted in Neuroimage right before the editorial board stepped down. So I was wondering what's going to happen next. So it's quite interesting time. And I also kind of like secretly hoping that, okay, now you guys have to waive the APC for me. But then the truth was that I got the invoice like 1 year after that. So I still have to pay for it. But like, that's my favorite episode. And so speaking of which, Peter, would you like to also share bits about the Spotify matrix in terms of the last seasons?
Yeah, yeah. And also, just before I get into that, I mean, yeah, I really like the future of scientific publishing as well. It's something I think a lot about, as a previous editor-in-chief of NeuroImage and now of this sort of startup Aperture Neuro. So yeah, definitely everyone thinks that having open access is a great thing. And it is a great thing for people to get free access to journals, but the payment has to come from somewhere. And so instead of biasing against the audience, it now not bias against, but it's sort of then they charge the publishers right up, or the writers of the article right up front, and which is also a challenge. It somehow discriminates in some sense against, if you're a lab that doesn't have as much money,
Hmm.
it would be hard to do. And so you try to keep those APCs as down as much as possible to the bare bones, which is probably somewhere around $1,000 a paper still. But there's other models, and yeah, we were discussing there's certain journals that actually do it very cheaply, but then you have to keep the quality up, and then there's all these trade-offs in this space. And then the question is, even the idea of publishing a PDF, is that the best unit of publication? Pretty soon, half the audience will probably be large language models as opposed to people. And so all the information will go into this space, and so maybe publication, will be very different. It'll evolve quickly, I think. Anyway, I just my 2 cents worth. Yeah, metrics. So just going off of at least the Spotify metrics, and it's also available on Apple Podcasts and any platform, but. For last year, at least, what I found was, 60% male, 33% female, 3% non-binary. The predominant age group was 28 to 34, and the second most was 23 to 27. And then it kept on going down, and I feel old because I'm almost 60 years old. I can't believe I can even say that. I feel like I'm 30 still. But the 60 plus is only 2%. I guess they have other things that they're doing. But oh well. For geography, U.S. is 43%, and then pretty evenly distributed among Canada, the U.K., Germany, and Australia, between 9 and 5% listening. And the platform for audio only is mostly Spotify, then Apple Podcasts, then Overcast. I use this thing called Castro. I kind of like Castro, but that wasn't mentioned. And then overall, from October 30th to September 10th, that was the time period of the podcast season. It was over 6,000 plays, almost 2,000 hours. An extra 215 followers were added. You had 60,000 downloads. And then about 280 listeners per episode. But some were very, very popular, like Sergio Gauss was popular. Cepeda Sedigiani was very popular. She talked about multimodal integration, a lot of amazing ideas with her podcast. And yeah, that's about it. But it's on YouTube, and I think you'll talk about YouTube a little bit.
Yeah. I'll talk a bit about YouTube Matrix as well. And also, I think it's always kind of good to have this kind of reflections on the numbers, and also to know more about our audience, and also maybe in the next seasons to know how to improve, and also how to reach out to more people and make it as more accessible. And so in terms of the YouTube, I think we actually get quite good of total views numbers. That's kind of like half numbers of the audio listener, but this is still quite solid numbers because we only have 15 episodes. Other interesting thing is that we've gained new subscribers, like nearly 50 people subscribe to our YouTube channels based on Neurosalience podcast. What's more encouraging is that almost every single episode brought in new subscribers, and that's quite amazing, to be honest. So basically, we have people just accidentally find this kind of content, but then just found it's quite interesting, and I would just want to listen more to this. And So that's quite encouraging. So that's for the Matrix, and this is just for us to do kind of like overall reflections of what happens in the last seasons. And since we have been talking about this, I also wanted to mention that last year actually is the 5th anniversary of the Neurosalience podcast, which is I feel like it's kind of like amazing milestone. And Peter, maybe you didn't realize that it means that 5 years of hard work, and also I actually counted. That means a total of 97 released episode. And if you include this one and also the one we recorded for Charlotte Wiseman, which is going to be the second episodes in the next season, so that come together brings us to 99 in total. I'm just so curious about this. So what keeps you motivated after all these years? And
Yeah, that's a good question. People ask me that. And I think actually, when I interview people that are more my colleagues, I think they are happy to go on the interview, but they deep down think I'm kind of crazy doing this. It's like, why am I not, spending more time doing research? And I am spending a lot of time doing research. And actually the fact is that what motivates me, well, I sort of thought about this a little bit, and I talk a lot about this in the episode where I give my talk on this as well. The time I put into the podcast, I mean, it started during COVID, and that was a time when I really felt it was needed to have some sort of connection with people in the field a little bit more. But now it's continuing on, and I think that there's kind of a multiplied value the time I put in, and that is, well, one, it's to the community. I feel, it's always nice to have random people come up to me at various contexts. People I wouldn't even expect who say, oh, yeah, I listen to it when I'm jogging. And I'm always like a little bit taken aback in a good way, but I'm sort of like, oh, you listen to it. Great. And so just the other day, I was talking to somebody who is a little bit outside the community. He does fMRI. He doesn't go to OHBM. He's a clinician. He's sort of young. And he felt it was really helpful for him to get a perspective of the field. To know who the main people are. Otherwise, you're just sort of, randomly digging into the literature. Okay, that was good to hear. It also helps me. I mean, I actually, everyone, every professor who's running a lab or whatever, wants to stay on top of things. And often reading papers is kind of low on a priority list. You kind of read a little bit and you kind of get a sense of things. You listen to talks and you sort of have a sense. But this forces me to sort of deeply investigate, one researcher at a time, but it kind of forces me to do what I should be doing anyway. And I enjoy that. It enhances my own research as well, indirectly. And then the third thing, I think that it helps the guests. I mean, the guests actually, they'd like to come on because it enhances their visibility and increases awareness of their own work. And so I'm motivated also. So those are the things that kind of motivate me at an intellectual level. But the bottom line is that, and people even ask me, like, what's the purpose of a podcast? I mean, you can get all the information in papers, but my feeling is that conversations, I realize more and more that I really, really enjoy good conversations, ones where, people exchange information and then learn something in the process. And having a conversation is very instinctive, and listening to conversations is very instinctive. And so people resonate with that. And that gives me a lot of pleasure to have really good conversations with people in the field. So that's what motivates me as well. It is a lot of work, but so far it's doable and it's worth it to me.
Yeah, that's so cool. And it actually kind of hit me about thinking of the time when I first listened to this podcast. I just realized that those, like our wonderful guests, they are not just the figures or names printed on excellent or amazing papers and just names out there, and then you're reading about their works. They're actually like human beings, and also people who are doing science also kind of face difficulties as well. And so as early career researchers, it's kind of so inspiring to listen to all this kind of both science and also life stories during their careers. And so it is really good way to just learn more about the peoples and also learn about the field.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I'm glad you mentioned that because, I mean, every single person I try to talk a little bit about their background, I'm always surprised that their career paths are almost every single one is not typical, where, they may have started in physics, studying like theoretical physics or gravity or something like that. And then they get into neuroscience, or, they go into something else. And so it's actually, it's really cool for, everyone should realize that they're not alone, and we're all struggling. We're all trying to figure out the brain and make a career of it. And it's hard. And yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a shared experience.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's for the general reflections of the last seasons, and also for the podcast over these years. And so now let's move on to the next season and talk a bit about like what's ahead. And so before we get into talking about new plans and new guests, I actually wanted to briefly touch on some recent news. One of the recent news, which is the retraction of the Diana paper. For anyone who might be new to this, so the Diana paper was highly influential publications in science back in 2022, and basically it described a novel method for detecting neuronal activities using fMRI at like high temporal resolution. So we actually featured a discussion on this in season 3 and episode 5, and with Peng Tai Choi and also Jae-Yong Park sharing their perspective on the work. And since then, more discussions have like kind of emerged, and we revisit the topic again in season 4 as well. And so the most recent update is that the authors have decided to retract their science papers. And so basically they first share a preprint in early September this year and explaining their decisions, and followed by the official retraction published on the 25th of September. So just 1 month ago. So I guess maybe we don't have enough time to get into details today, but like I would just know more about your thought, Peter. What are your reflections on this development, and do you think we might have anyone who's like coming up here and we'll speak more about it in the new seasons?
Yeah, I'd love to have a sort of a reflection on that, but also bringing up the bigger issue of, to me, I mean, it's sort of a lesson in that we should all take home. And that is, if you find yourself really wanting a result to be a certain way, that's sort of a red flag. And it's not that you'll try to, fudge the data or do anything wrong. I mean, and people try to actually, objectively prevent this, like, preventing p-hacking and all kinds of things like that. But you'll still do your analysis with the hope of finding something. And if you see something, then you might go in that direction. And I think we should all be careful of that. And so that's sort of a general lesson. Yeah, when the Diana paper first came out, I'll be honest, I believed it. To me, on first read or first 5 reads, paper was pretty convincing, and the results were compelling. There were some things that I was worried about, like the p-values seemed strangely high. But overall, I liked the idea, and it seemed like it was convincing data. And so I was on the bandwagon. I interviewed them. I was really enthusiastic. And then I, started talking to more colleagues, and it turns out my uneasiness about certain aspects sort of grew. We were concerned that the way, if you have like a noisy signal and you have a model function that you're looking for, and you select the data just as to the extent that it matches that model function from any data with any noise, you can actually extract that. That's sort of a match filter. I don't know exactly if they did that. And that another red flag, that they never really shared the data, which people should be concerned about. So then we wrote an article talking about that sort of thing. And it was unfortunate, though, because actually I feel the authors felt like they were being unfairly attacked. And it wasn't the case at all. We're just scientists, and we're trying to reproduce it ourselves in our own lab. In fact, I tried reproducing it, didn't get any results with the images, but I tried doing just, a multi-echo with a single coil, not even doing any imaging, just to collect the signal. We thought we saw something that looked interesting, but then on looking at it more, it became less convincing, and you just have to learn to just simply let it go if it doesn't fit what you want. And So we never published that. We were excited about it, but then we're like, oh, it's not happening. And then finally, hopefully they'll understand that, we were just trying to understand why it wasn't being reproduced. And there were other papers coming out saying, oh, well, there's timing artifacts and things like that. And I think that in their retraction, they wrote something saying that it was maybe for those reasons that the results were not reproducible when they corrected that problem. But they're still hopeful. The senior author actually is still talking about it. I wish him the best. As far as we all want, I mean, it's kind of a holy grail in fMRI to be able to look at neural current signal directly. Theoretically, it should be there, but it's clearly showing that we don't understand enough about the signal that produces MEG so robustly. We don't understand enough about its spatial and temporal properties to be able to say that, it should be, whatever it is, measurable. The back of the envelope sort of calculations say it's within an order of magnitude, but that's a lot. And so we have a long ways to go. And I actually feel that bold is pretty good. I'm becoming more convinced that, there's a good connection between neural activity and fMRI, and being able to integrate over time gives you a lot of signal to noise and a lot of latitude of not missing things that happen too transiently. And so it's very limited. Even if it worked, it would be very limited. So anyway, that's my take on the whole thing. I'm still, back of my head, I'm always sort of thinking of ways of trying to pull something more out along those lines, as are a lot of people. And I just, I hope it can be done. And maybe someday someone will figure something out or not, and we'll keep on going. But I think one other nice lesson from this, and not only, to be careful of what data you want to see, but the other lesson is that even though it was incorrect, science is amazing because it self-corrects. You publish a paper, and even if it's published in Nature, if it's not reproduced, it's not going to catch on. And so, science has a way of just of self-correcting constantly, and that's a wonderful thing. Yeah. Anyway.
And Peter, and can you kind of share a bit more about other guests or topics that you are hoping to feature in the upcoming season?
Yeah. So already the whole process of inviting people, getting them to agree on a time and whatever is underway. We have 5 people lined up. I'm hesitant, or 4 people lined up, 5 people actually, 6 actually, including, well, hopefully these will all happen. So, including Helen Zhao, Kendrick Kay, Marta Garrido, Chris Baldessamo, and Alessandro Gazzi. Some of these people talked at OHBM. I was so fascinated with what they had to say. I wanted to talk to them more. Ahmed Khalili, who actually studies resting state bold and trying to use it clinically. And many other people are on the list, but also, we talked ourselves about having more panel discussions. Well, there's a bunch of ideas for panel discussions, either talking about, some controversial topic or some broad perspective that one wants to get on something, or even things that are kind of esoteric, but actually really important. Like, one thing that came up was, the idea of like registered reports. Registered reports are where you actually say exactly what you're going to do and you publish that and then you stick to that. And then the question, there's 2 sides of this. There's probably many sides of it. One is like, this is how everyone should do it. And the other side is like, no one does it that way. In reality, there's always some amount of iteration, and the other side will say, well, that's just sloppy and that's not correct. It might be, but it's really interesting discussion to be had because they're really good scientists on both sides of this discussion. So I really want to have a discussion like that. There's other things that are sort of near and dear to my heart are, questions that have come up before, like how is fMRI ever going to be clinically useful, actually from day to day? What does resting state connectivity really mean? How do you interpret it? What are we missing? Maybe I'll talk about, there was actually in cerebral cortex, there was an anniversary of 30 years of SPM. I had to write an article on it. And I thought, well, this would be a good panel discussion of like, what's the role of SPM? And my editorial was sort of suggesting that while SPM has a role, a major role, are there things we're missing? Then shouldn't we develop tools for exploring features? Because quite often you might have, a perfectly correct p-value, for instance. It's statistically sound, but it might be incorrect because you're either over or under interpreting some assumption in those models. So that's an interesting discussion to be had as well, maybe. So that's just a few ideas. I welcome any of the audience to email me about possible discussion points as well. And I'm happy to, have them on if they want to be as well. So.
Yeah, just if anyone is interested in it and hope that being one of the episode of the podcast, just email us and yeah, we can certainly talk more about like science and also all different stories out there. And Peter, and those topics you just mentioned, they're very interesting. And me personally also wanted to listen more to this. And we also tried to make this season more accessible to more different audience, or even make it accessible to general public. So I guess some of the topics that you mentioned is just a good way to make this podcast and make content that is available and accessible to different level of people. And so yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So just to add really quickly, you're right. And actually, I left that part out in terms of making it. I'm actually trying to push myself, completely outside of my comfort zone and talk to other neuroscientists who don't use imaging at all. I mean, just do, animal studies or even, I even have on my list some philosophers or, people talking about consciousness. And is there a testable hypothesis that we can use imaging for to, that sort of thing. So I'm trying to think carefully about the right guests to have that would make it more accessible to a broader audience as well. So.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Yeah, very exciting and looking forward to who's lined up next. And yeah, I also wanted to take this chance to mention a bit about some kind of things that we as production team want to try out this season. So as mentioned earlier, we kind of have a solid numbers of audio listeners, but also we have good numbers of people who are like just watching the YouTube videos. So that's kind of really inspiring. And we started to think about maybe these days we can try to create some clips, short reels from each episode, because basically our episodes would be like about 1 hour and even after editing. So it's quite dense in terms of the content, but maybe when we are trying to create the clips and maybe featuring on different content across the episodes, that would make it even more accessible. Because for example, Peter would generally ask the guests to have some advice to students or early career researchers, and we think that might be really good to just grab those moments from each episode, and then hopefully students who are not familiar with that or even just new to the field, we can just always have something to take away from this. So yeah, that's some thought. And also another thing I want to mention is that we certainly, this season, we just want to make all the resource and materials more transparent to our audience. So we would just put the links in the description, because basically we are mentioning about different papers and projects. And sometimes we may just kind of, I don't know, in details in terms of these projects and papers, but this term we would just make everything there, and so you can just quickly have a look and get a better ideas of what we are like talking about and discuss, and hopefully that kind of like bridge the knowledge gap. So yeah,
and also, we have this new platform, Riverside, that allows screen sharing if people want to throw up a graph or something, or we could discuss a paper, or who knows. And I like the idea of clips, having things that are maybe you can post to Instagram or something like that. Yeah. And we're going to hopefully try a number of things just to increase the interest or even increase the utility of this of this podcast. Yeah. And also, I wanted to just mention and to thank, when we started out, Kevin Sitek was the production person, and then it went to Alfie Warren, and then Farouk Gaiban, who was helping out for a while, and he was fun because he kept on having new ideas about, he was the one who suggested as far as a number of podcasts actually, and so he was very enthusiastic, and so I look forward to working with you as well as far as that's concerned. And, yeah.
Yeah, because we have the whole team here as the production team, and there are like all volunteers and in the committee or in OHBM who are trying to help with editing or writing intros or just making all this possible and make this happen. So generally a big thank you to Farouk, Nega, Alfie, and Karthik for all their work for the last seasons. I really hope more people will join us as the part of the production team, because it's such a great fun and rewarding experience. So yeah, and we are just love to hear more conversations and more interviews from you, Peter. And it's just quite interesting.
Well, I look forward to it.
Yeah.
This will be fun.
Right. So
right.
it's time to wrap up. And so again, lovely to chatting with you, Peter, today. And thank you once again for being as the host of the Neurosalience podcast for HBM. And yeah, thanks everyone who's listening, and see you in the next episode.
Neurosalience is brought to you by the Organisation for Human Brain Mapping. This week's episode is produced by Xuqian Michelle Li.